Have you ever been afraid of what people will think of you if you make things? What if they laugh at you or worse, pity you?
Today on Honestly, Dear Listener, we're talking about fear, noticing it, how to find the root of it, and what to do when you feel like it's stopping you from being your truest self. I'm Emily Hatch.
And I'm Carrie Schaefer, and this is Honestly, Dear Listener.
Honestly, dear listener.
Woo! Okay, so my face is different.
And in that one moment, there was a lateral lisp as well.
Uh huh.
So my face is different.
So here's the deal. I have been a grinder and chewer my entire life, chewing on everything. You know, those little things that were on the top of milk cartons, the big gallon plastic ones that was like
Oh,
the
with the.
purity seal or whatever, the freshness seal, purity. Oh, man.
Yeah,
Oh,
those. The
uh
purity
huh.
seals.
Yep.
So then when
Yep.
your milk's a total whore after you take it off.
Yes. Sorry, a life of evangelical Christianity is just can't ever remove it completely. So, yeah, I would pull those off, and all I wanna do is chew on them all the
Mm.
time, and I'd always wanna chew on dried pasta, like dried spaghetti, and then I'd grind like crazy at night. So, all of those
Grind your teeth. Let's
factors.
be clear, because when you opened with I've been grinding my
Wait,
whole life.
what does that mean? If not teeth for teeth?
Well, like, you grind on somebody, like, it's
Oh,
like
like
humping.
Beyoncé surfboard.
Yeah,
Grind on that
surfboard.
surfboard.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, no, I have grounded
Grand.
grand my teeth for my entire life, and as a result, both of my TMJ, temporomandibular joints, which is
Mm,
basically the joint that attaches your mandible or your jaw to your skull, both of them are pretty corroded.
mm.
So now I have to wear this splint, and if you're watching the video, it's gonna look like a little shiny bubble in the bottom of my mouth. It's just a piece of acrylic that keeps me from doing all that nonsense, but also has me slightly lispy.
You're adorable, and today you also have pigtails. So this is, like, the cutest. I just wanna hop through this screen and squeeze your cheeks right now. You're so cute.
I said this earlier, I feel like a 40-year-old baby.
You're the best 40-year-old baby I've ever known. And that's saying a
Thanks.
lot because I used to date older men when I was younger, and I knew a lot of 40-year-old babies. You
Nice.
are you are my very favorite.
Well, thanks. Hopefully, my lisp is not too off-putting, but I have to have it for the next 3 months.
I think you're doing great.
Emily, what the hell has been going on with you?
Oh, man. A lot, actually. I've been doing lots of music-y things and teaching. I'm finally in a place where, like, I have some jobs so I could get my nails done, and I am really excited. So if you're watching the video, you can see. It's super weird how good it feels to have my nails done. What about
I
you? What's
love that.
happening in your land?
Oh, well, I am currently making a blazer, like a piece of clothing blazer,
Mm.
and I had no idea when I started like, I know that blazers and tailored jackets and all that stuff is kind of a whole other level of sewing as far as attention to detail. I was not prepared for how detailed this work was going to be. I mean,
Really?
usually, if you have a garment, like a simple garment is usually 4 to 6 pieces for the body. Now, there might be a collar, there might be a welt pocket or whatever. And that adds pattern pieces is what they're called. And you cut out the pattern pieces and you sew it all together and that creates your garment.
Mhm.
Well, there are upwards of 30 pattern pieces for this blazer.
Whoa, dude.
Basically, what this has caused is for me to look at every tailored jacket and blazer with reverential awe. I respect them so much more. Now that I know all the things that go into them, tailors that are making these suits for these bespoke suits,
Mhm.
I mean, they're doing so much of the work by hand, not even with a machine.
Wow.
That is nuts. So if you're ever like, I wonder why this suit costs this much. A, the fabric's probably really expensive, especially if it's wool. And B, somebody is like getting down and dirty with that piece of fabric.
Hmm.
And what I mean by down and dirty is hand sewing it.
I'm sorry. I hope I didn't give you a complex after the, like, grinder. Was it last week you didn't know what Netflix and chill was?
I totally didn't, and I said it in the episode, and then afterward, Emily was like, "You do know what Netflix and chill is?" And I was like, "Yeah, like, you watch Netflix and you chill out." And she was like, "No, it's when you" what did you say?
You, like, invite somebody over to do it. Basically, you're like, "Let's cut the date. Let's just go back to my place and, in air quotes, watch a movie." Like, and,
How am I supposed to know that?
you have me. And so
Okay.
so we've talked about, like, how we've gone totally different directions in our, like, weirdness that you're, like, causing our brother to stumble, and I'm like, "Let's cause our brother to stumble." So, like, I totally went, like, real gross and weird the opposite direction. So, I will tell you, I will be your Becky. When I was in high school, I had a friend who would I'd be like, "Ha, ha, ha," when someone would tell a joke that I knew was dirty and I had no idea what it meant, and then I'd be like, "Becky, what does it mean?" Because Becky was also a good girl, but she, like, knew some stuff about stuff.
Mm.
She wasn't like, you know she was in the world, not of it, you know?
Ah,
Um, and I was out of this world. I had no idea what was going on. So I'll be
mhm.
your Becky.
Thank you. And just so everyone knows, if this is your first time that you're tuning into this podcast, Emily and I were raised Protestant, Pentecostal, evangelical Christian. And so we grew up not knowing anything about anything. And then that's it, it definitely leaves holes in your social education,
And
which is why I
sexual,
don't know what
especially.
yes. Which is why I don't know what Netflix and chill means.
Um, okay, really quick, we weren't planning on
Yes.
doing this, but what is the weirdest thing you believed about sex when you
Oh,
were a kid?
shoot.
Like, so mine was like, I think I was too old to think this. I thought if a boy and a girl peed in the same toilet and they left it, that it would grow a baby, and the only reason there weren't babies in toilets is because we flushed them. I didn't think about the fact that it, like, goes and mixes, so there were probably a bunch of sewer babies, I don't know. That's probably the weirdest, dumbest thing I thought, because I knew it had
Mhm.
something to do with genitals, I just didn't know what all happened. Um
Right. I thought that the way that you made a baby was you went to the hospital and you thrashed around on a clear table. Why it was clear, I don't know. That's just what I had in my mind. You thrashed around on a clear table and then you came home with a baby. But that makes absolutely no sense because I saw my mom pregnant and like where was that time? So I don't know.
Maybe it's because, like, if you accidentally saw a movie, like, where your parents didn't realize there was a sex scene and there was, like, thrashing around under a blanket or
Mm,
something? I don't
mhm.
know. Or, like, then
I don't know where I got that. It was almost like a purity ceremony in a way in my brain, the way I thought about it. It was very futuristic. So, like, everyone was in white and everyone was, like, very serious about it and like, "Oh, yes, the progeny of blah, 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 whatever." And I don't know where that came from.
mm.
Oh, other than all the purity culture
Oh, right.
that we
And
grew
that's
up with.
is that also how we open our milk containers too? Just kidding.
The purity.
Ceremony.
Is that what a purity ring was? Which,
Oh,
by the way, I had
dang.
one of those.
Me too. And I defiled it. I definitely, not the ring itself, but Um,
Yeah.
oops.
A purity ring, for everybody that doesn't know, are a thing that you give out to evangelical Christian teen girls as, like, a way to be, like, helping them make a promise to God that they won't have sex before marriage. Now, here's the deal with that, though.
Mm.
I had one the day I turned 13. Did my brother have one? My brother's 4 years younger than me. Did he ever have a purity ring? Was his purity ever discussed to my knowledge? No, it was not.
Of course it wasn't. Nope.
Which
It's weird. I got mine at 16.
really?
And the other weird thing is that your dad gives it to you usually. Like, this is so gross. Anyway,
Yeah.
but
If you
if
wanna check out our previous episodes on fundamentalism, we did them a couple episodes ago. I think it was episode 21 and 22. Check the show notes because I will have them listed in there.
honestly, a lot of our show contains childhood trauma, which is that religious upbringing, which, as I mentioned, I think last episode, is fascinating to people who
Oh,
have
yeah.
not had to deal with it. And I have to tell
Yes.
you, with all this stuff that we have talked about with this, I have a lot of friends still that are very much immersed in that culture, and I'm worried that they think I just don't care about any of this anymore.
Yeah, can we talk about that real quick? Because I
Yeah,
have friends too that I'm always like, "Are they listening to this? Oh, no."
or they're thinking that it's that basically now we're just like, I can't speak for you, but just like, God's stupid and God sucks, and that's how we feel
Mhm.
now, and that's not it at all.
Yeah.
Um, I I mean, we don't have to talk about our belief system here, but I I treasure a lot of things about the way I grew up. I've mentioned before that my parents were very loving people, and I was very
Mhm.
lucky to have, though like misguided in many ways, that's just what happens, very lovely,
Mhm.
loving, supportive parents. And my belief still remains that there's somebody bigger out there that loves us. And I just don't have to make people believe what I believe. I get concerned that people think that I'm just like, I've
Mhm.
denounced everything. But then again, does it matter what I believe to another person? It probably shouldn't, but it concerns me.
But it it shouldn't matter, but for me, it's fear. I'm afraid. I'm afraid because one of the worst things for humans is disconnection.
Mm,
Disconnection is painful, especially when you have had community with other people that you've built bonds with and you've been vulnerable with, like I have with a lot of friends who I know are part of a Western Christian faith tradition.
hmm
And I am afraid, if I'm honest. And I can't speak for them totally, but I know what it was like for me when I found out that somebody was maybe not believing exactly what I believed anymore. I would feel a sense of, "Oh, now they are out there. They're the
hmm
other. They're not a part of our group anymore." And that is disconnection. So,
Yep.
yeah, I'm absolutely afraid of disconnection. Man, pull the plug of connection on what we have had in the past. Oh,
Mm.
that's a gut punch.
Absolutely. I mean, from what I understand, a biological human thing that we, used to run in packs almost, and
Mhm,
to be disconnected or push out of the group that you're supposed to be traveling with or living with meant danger and
mhm.
and yeah, isolation
And
from the
whether or
group
not you
is
survived.
exactly the difference. It's life and death in those kind of circumstances, and obviously we're not in that exact situation anymore, most of us, but it's the same kind of response.
Mhm,
And that's, I forget who said it, but that's a lot of why we're afraid to upset people, or we hear people say, well, it shouldn't matter if one person says something negative to you when all these other people are saying such nice things. But it is that kind of biological response that you're looking for the danger. And the danger is obviously between life and death things, but also isolation. That, like,
Mhm.
looking out, making sure people approve of you, um, and being afraid of that disapproval. It's a biological thing. So I think, I mean, you could hear it in just what I said. Like, I don't want to feel like, well, why does it matter what people think of me? I don't want to feel like it matters. But,
Mhm.
it does. And
Yeah.
being afraid of that is a normal thing.
Yeah. So, along those same lines, we wanted to talk about fear today because I think that fear is one of those I mean, like, the fear centers in our brain are some of the most ancient centers of thinking. Like, those parts of our brains kept us alive. And even though we've developed a prefrontal cortex and, all this logic and all that stuff, we still have that ancient part of our brains to contend with. Um, and that is the fear part. And I think especially when we're talking about being an artist or a creative, fear is such a main player in that.
Absolutely. Um, and it's such a tough thing because it's like saying, when we say, I just don't want to be afraid, like, I wish I could just get rid of that fear.
Mhm.
That fear, as you mentioned, is what has kept us alive. In many cases, I mean, that fear is what keeps you from walking down the dark alley or driving into oncoming traffic or doing, you know, things that could potentially harm you. So it's a big friend. Fear is a friend.
Mhm.
Um, but it also can get in the way of doing all the things that you're trying to do as a creative person because you're fearing isolation, because you're fearing. I mean, when I work with my students, sometimes I just ask, what are you afraid of? And I think for me, that's been like just a good question when I'm like realizing that I'm afraid of something. I'm like, what am I actually afraid of happening?
Mm.
Um, and I think a lot of it for creatives comes down to that isolation thing, but I think it goes a lot in a lot more directions than that, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. I keep hearing just this sense of from when I hear other artists talk about fear, I hear that it doesn't matter who you are or what level you've achieved in your art or what level of fame you've achieved, that everyone across the board feels it. And that it does almost that and I don't want this to sound hopeless or anything, but that it doesn't go away. But instead, it's what we choose to do with it that r really helps to define, whether we're successful in our ventures or not. And, I read a book years ago, I mean, you can sum up the whole book in the title. It's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. I'll link it in the show notes. But basically, that was the whole book, was saying, "Okay, we are sitting around waiting for this feeling to disappear before we start something.
Mm,
It's not going to. It's gonna be there." And instead of waiting for it to go away, instead saying, "Okay, I see you. I feel you. I hear you, but I'm gonna do this thing anyway."
mhm.
And, I think, you hear too about all the definitions of bravery. Bravery is not the absence of fear or not feeling fear. It is quite literally feeling the fear and doing it anyway.
Totally. You know, I was just thinking, our episode last week, we talked about vices and the things that are kind of stopping us, our belief systems that, create some of those vices and changing our beliefs. And I was just thinking about the fact that a lot of the time we don't notice that why we're turning to other things or running away from things is because we're afraid.
Mhm.
And I think noticing that it's fear a lot of the time is so important because sometimes we just don't stop to take a second to look at why. I saw someone on our TikTok had commented and said, "Well, I'm numbing. That's why I smoke weed or whatever." Like, yes, but why are you numbing?
Mm.
Like, because ultimately, I think, and I can't speak for everyone, but most of us are afraid.
Mhm.
We need to like t- take down that fear knob or the voice that's telling us we can't do it. But noticing that it's fear is half the battle. I
Mhm.
use an analogy with my students also sometimes that is like if you're just in a room, right, and you notice that there's a puddle of blood that seems to be surrounding you on the floor, and you just keep mopping up the blood and being like, God, this is terrible. I like, where's the blood coming from? Oh, my
Mm.
arm is missing. Okay, well, now we gotta like take care of that thing. So if you're stuck in this cycle of, I just can't make something, I just can't, like, where's it coming from?
Mhm.
It's probably fear.
And keep asking, is there a root underneath that reason? Is there a root reason underneath that reason until you get to what is it called? The tap root
Mm.
of the plant, which is the thing that goes all the way down. And I think you're right. I think for a lot of people, myself included, fear is almost always my tap root.
You were saying before that if you wait until the fear goes away, you'll probably never do it because you're gonna be afraid, right? Um, I used to think that maybe I would have enough experiences because I tend to push through fear because I'm very anxious. I thought I would get enough experiences under my belt that I would trust myself. And then, like, when given bigger tasks, I would be good at it, like good at the fear fighting. So I wouldn't be afraid with bigger tasks. And in my life currently, I feel that I've leveled up a lot of things that I'm doing. And I can tell you the fear just gets bigger with it, which is so
Yay!
sad. I was really hoping it'd be like, oh, I've like, not I've arrived, but I've gotten to a place where like I can trust myself. I've done these things, I've done this stuff, and I would have like a good fortress built against this. No, no, the monster just like got taller, you know?
So
Um,
maybe we amend our expectations. If our expectations are the more successful or the more I get into this craft, the less the fear will be. Amend those expectations to be the further in I get to this, I will always feel the fear, but the more I practice, I will have a better response to it.
and maybe more, this is a weird analogy perhaps, but more weapons to fight.
Mhm. More in your
So
toolbox.
exactly. So you just
Yes.
before you just had like a little megaphone that was like, "Don't, please go
Mhm.
away." And and now you've got your shield and you've got your sword and you've got your like, okay, I'm going to have to
Mhm.
fight this. And
Mhm.
now I've got a lot more things cuz I've collected them in my journeys.
Right. And that's an interesting point that you bring up too is in I took some life coaching training. I'm a life coach on the side, and one of the trainings was that we worked a lot in metaphor, and metaphors are really interesting because they structure how you think about something, albeit in a word picture. But those pictures are powerful. So when we're talking about fear, it's really easy, and I've seen so many people online and everything talk about fear like, yeah, punch fear in the face or, like kick fear to the curb or shut the door on fear. And it's interesting because that suggests that fear is our foe and fear is something that is the enemy. When really, I wonder if, I mean, we're talking about these centers in our brain, these fear centers that are keeping us alive, that are pivotal for survival. So, what if our fear is actually a friend that is just a little too anxious about everything?
It's me. Mm, sorry.
I mean, but truly, like, what if there is noble intent behind fear? What if it's not just this person that's trying to screw up our lives? What if it really is instead this persona or this part of us in our brain that's like, I only want what's best for you. And the more you get out there and you put yourself out there and you make stuff, the more likelihood there is that somebody is going to not like it and will say something mean to you. And we can't handle that. So just don't do it. Just don't make the thing, which is a noble intent. Fear is trying to keep us safe instead of being feeling like, oh, I have to punch fear in the face. Instead, having a kind, gentle conversation with it and saying, "Hey, I see you, I hear you, and I acknowledge that you're trying to keep me safe. However, I do not need you to try and keep me safe in this context. So please feel free. Lay down on the back couch of our mind and take a nap. And I got this from here." Just changing that one small thing about how we view fear, how would that change our response to it?
That's huge.
Liz Gilbert talks about this. Liz Gilbert is a writer and she's been on podcasts. She has a book called Big Magic, which, if you are a creative of any type, I would say please run out and buy and read Big Magic. It has been incredible for me. Also, though, okay, rewind. Don't buy the book. I mean, buy the book if you want to, but listen to her narrate that book because it is, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. It is so, her voice is magical, her cadence, she kind of has this like kind of really calm and wise note in her voice. And it is just like butter being poured into my soul.
Mm. I like it.
Not that you would pour butter. I don't know why butter was the thing,
I
but
mean, maybe your soul wants butter. Sometimes mine does. Um,
yeah.
but she
But
she has that analogy that
mhm,
in the book that sorry, I love it too, and I've read it a couple times. Fear is a part of our journey. Her metaphor is that it's going to be with us, um, and it can be because it's a big part of what keeps us safe and who we are. But it cannot drive the car.
yeah, so if we're all on this journey in a car together, kind of like fear is going to be one of the people in the car. You don't have a choice whether fear is in the car or not, but you do have a choice on whether it's driving. And she says, under no circumstances, fear, are you allowed to drive this car. It's not because I hate you. You're on this journey, so I will respect you and I will be kind. But I'm sorry, you cannot drive this car.
Hmm. I love that so much.
Hmm.
I think you can also take a peek because a lot of us have overcome things and fear in our lives and take a peek at a time or two in the past that you were scared to do something and then you did it. And then what happened? And I think that's a good thing to look at too. That nothing bad probably happened, right? Or something maybe a little bad happened. Well, okay, so I'm thinking of this in terms of performance, right? I've had people say, and I've had performances where I was nervous and I messed something up. Okay, that was bad, in air quotes. Well, what happened after that? Nothing. People
Mm,
clapped and we went home. Okay, cool. And then I felt bad, but nothing bad happened to me as a
mm,
result of something I was afraid of going a little bit bad. So, using that reassurance also to replay some of those things for yourself and be like, oh, yeah, I was really afraid the last time I did this thing or the time this happened, but I did it anyway. And nothing bad happened to me. And
yeah.
so, facing this fear, in fact, something good happened. I did a thing I was afraid to do. And if I hadn't done it, what would have played out that way? Like,
Mhm.
what if I hadn't? What bad things would have happened then? And I think the shame, not the shame, but the like bummer there is that you wouldn't have done it at all. And
Mhm.
then no one would have seen or heard or read or whatever consumed the thing that you wanted to put out.
Absolutely.
So look at your success stories.
It's like going back, replaying the memory and telling that part of your brain, "Hey, you wanna tell me that I'm gonna die here?" Because maybe in olden times, cave person days, you maybe would've. Fear was quite literally keeping you alive, but now so many of us live in a situation where our survival is not on the table day to day, but our biology is still acting like it is because
Mhm.
we really haven't evolved that much. We've added some logic parts of our brains, but those old parts are still very much similar to what they always were. So reminding it, hey, in we're not in a life and death situation generally from day to
Mhm.
day. I think that's good.
I find that the more I practice it, the better it gets. And
Mhm.
and and sometimes I take breaks from being brave. Sometimes I don't have a circumstance. This happened recently. I don't have a circumstance for a while that I'm putting myself in a really kind of scary situation. And so that happened with my last audition. I hadn't been in that situation for a really long time, and I was terrified. I shook really bad, and I don't typically shake. Um,
Mm.
and that was not my favorite outcome. I didn't love that. I think I sounded okay, not sure, kind of blacked out. But I didn't really have a lot of those experiences under my belt for a while, so I needed to put myself in more of situations where I could face that and overcome it. The practicing of that really helps. The more shows I'm doing, the less I feel it because I just did it last week and I'm fine. And
Mhm.
it doesn't mean I don't get nervous, but I think putting yourself in situations where you can practice low stakes being afraid. If you're a performer, I always recommend going to an open mic and just playing a song or singing a song or doing something like that where you are safe. You're not in a place where anything really bad could happen. If you mess up, everybody else probably did too. Not a big
Mhm.
deal. But like how can you practice? I've actually, because I've been alone a lot, like sometimes when I go in public now, I get nervous, which is weird. I've been like scheduling myself times to just go by myself to a coffee shop or go sit somewhere, just give yourself some little things you can practice being
Mm.
afraid. If you get nervous in a coffee shop, nothing bad's going to happen. You can leave whenever you want. Um, just stuff like that. Or I want to take more pictures and I'm afraid to do that. Well, go, ask your friends if you can take some pictures of them and just try some stuff.
Mhm.
Um, give yourself some ways you can practice before maybe you have a really big thing that you're nervous about.
Absolutely. So I'm making this blazer right now. The blazer with all the pattern pieces,
Yes.
and so much of it is me looking down the road to the end and being like, "But what if I'm at an event and I'm wearing this blazer that I thought was really good?" And then someone comes up to me and is like, "Oh, poor thing. She doesn't know that the welt pockets don't look very professional." I had that thought and I was like, "What?" And it affected whether I wanted to work on the blazer in the moment. It's almost like fear causes us to look way further down the path than is helpful. Instead
Mhm.
of just saying, "Nope, right now I am cutting out my lining and I'm just going to focus on that one little bit." And before you know it, then you have a whole blazer. And guess what? What if it's not perfect? What if somebody is like, "Oh, the welt pockets are dismal." Who Okay, I never said that I arrived What if we're all just practicing instead of this is the pinnacle of all of sewing that I can do that of the world? You know, what if everything we're doing is practicing? And it's a subtle shift in and you can apply this to anything. I'm practicing writing, I'm practicing performing, I'm practicing da da da. Inherent in that is I'm still working at something. I'm still I don't like the word perfecting at all because it suggests that there is a perfection, which I don't believe there is.
Me neither. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm working on something, I'm refining
Fine
something,
tuning.
I'm
Yes.
yeah, fine tuning all of it. Even if you make an album or a CD. Do they have CDs anymore?
They do. They do. They're
Okay,
coming, making a
well,
comeback, really, I've heard.
even if you're making an album, maybe looking at it like a practice instead of this will be hanging out in the ether for eternity. That's too much pressure. Ugh, it's too much. I'm just practicing, which is interesting because a lot of Eastern traditions like yoga, I mean, yes, we're doing yoga, but there's no like accomplishing yoga. There's only the practice of yoga
Mhm.
because I think a lot of Eastern mindset understands that not approaching it like practicing is it's too inflexible, I guess.
Yeah. I like to look at it like taking snapshots of where you
Mm,
are. So the events that you have created in your life, whether it's your album or it's your blazer or it's, your photography or your stand-up routine, whatever it may be, is a snapshot of this time. I know a
mhm,
lot of people who are like, "Well, I don't wanna, like, put this song on the album because I'm sure I can write better songs." Well, take a snapshot of what you're writing right now. Document your life. This is like
mhm,
you're making your history, and not to put more pressure on it, but it's more like a photograph of where you are.
mhm,
So your blazer's not perfect. This is where you are right now, and you had the courage and knowledge to make a blazer. I can't do that. I'm impressed. Take a snapshot of that,
mm.
as you're practicing.
If we don't love the versions of ourselves in the snapshots as we go along, is there ever gonna be a snapshot that we look at and say, "Yeah, that's it. That I finally love that one."
Mm,
If we can learn to love our snapshots along the way, that's the point. Not that there will be one that will be lovable or
mm,
deserve love because of what that person has accomplished.
mhm, mhm. And that's a practice. Ooh,
Yeah,
that is
that
a
that is
big
like the
practice.
practice.
I mean, how many of us are like, "I don't like pictures to be taken of me." And then as we go, maybe our mothers and our friends and us look back at those pictures we didn't want to be taken of us and say, "I thought I was this. I thought I was this. Why didn't anyone tell me I was the da 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 da?" And it's like you could look at it like facing your fear now and making that thing now is very similar, so that in the
Mhm,
future you can look back at how far you've come. You can look back and say, "Oh, I didn't appreciate that sweet part of me in that moment, and I appreciate her now. That's growth for me."
mm.
That my voice was in so much better of a place at that time than it was 10 years before that. I was growing and I didn't even know. It makes me emotional to think about it. It's just like, but having the ability to have that fear take a back seat so you can even do that thing right now, that's an accomplishment. That's a practice,
Absolutely, absolutely.
and it's worth doing.
Yeah. So much of my life, I have used fear to motivate myself,
Mm,
and it actually is, in some ways, an effective motivator for a lot of people. I mean, mine was do the most perfect job you can singing this song or playing this part, because if you don't, people are going to think you're not very good at this. And if people think you're not very good at this, then there's your self-worth down the drain.
Mm,
And that is a motivator for sure. I mean, it motivated me for years, but as a result now, I have kind of a I have developed a less healthy relationship with performance in general. And the fear that I used to motivate myself to do a good job in those performances have taken me away from where I want to be, which is joy.
mhm,
Um, and so in life coaching, we talk about toward motivations and we talk about away motivations. So here's an example. An away motivation is I don't want to be poor. And so I'm going to work really hard and I'm going to motivate myself to work really hard so that I can get money because I don't want to be poor. Away motivations use fear as the prime mover in to get you to do something
mm,
versus a toward motivation, which is I want to be financially free. So I'm going to work really hard so that have the ability to do what I wanna do and to feel financially free. Now, it's the
mm,
same outcome, right? It's you in both scenarios, you need money, so you're gonna work hard. But one uses fear to motivate. "Oh, you don't wanna be looking like that person where you've got holes in your pants and da da da." You don't wanna come across as that person. You don't wanna
mm,
be poor. And one uses, "No, I'm going to put my goal up there, my positive goal, and I'm gonna have that as my North Star." Toward motivations bring us closer to our goals, and they do it through a sense of positivity. They bring us closer to joy.
I love that. It is like a reframing,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely.
And saying, like, something that is motivating me by making me feel bad about myself
Mhm.
is gonna burn me out, and it's gonna make me stay in a constant state of negativity and scarcity in this case, right? Like we talked about last week, versus like who I want to be and who I am becoming, and doing something from a joyful mindset is going to be a lot easier to live in on a day-to-day basis, and much more positive. So toward that, I love that. That's awesome.
When I decide want to start working on helping to heal that performance part of me, my intention is to say, I acknowledge the fear. I acknowledge that I have used no away motivations to try and get me to do what I want to do. Instead of trying to prove my self-worth, because at the bottom of that, the taproot is I don't have self-worth.
Mm,
So I'm proving that I do by what I do. Um, Instead, I'm gonna replace that with I want to perform for joy. I want to be on that stage and I want to feel gratefulness that I get to do something that I love. And I get to
mm,
connect with other people in that very special way that you can only do through music. And that for me is what I want that toward motivation to be.
mm.
So,
I love that so much. That's
yeah.
awesome. Listening to you talk about it, it's like, how many places in our lives have we not noticed that we were using away? Like, listening to you say that is like, oh my gosh, I could think of like 5 areas in my life that I'm like, "Oh, I'm doing away a lot." And that
Mm.
is exhausting, you
Mhm.
know? And I've also been trying to shift. I didn't frame it that way, but
Mhm.
what I have been really working hard on for the last probably 6 months is actually the toward thing, those like affirmations, and thinking about what you want things to be like, and going after those things instead of it nipping at your heels, chasing you down, like the fear of inadequacy or, poverty or uh, that kind of stuff. Like, how many places are you doing that and don't even notice?
Yep.
And there's no shame in that. We're just noticing.
Mhm.
We're gonna have to change this to the noticing podcast.
That's right. That truly is the first step, though, to so much of this is paying attention, and I think that that's what being an artist is, across all disciplines. It doesn't matter what you do. I think that creative people are sensitive and they pay attention. I we talk about creativity as this, like, woo-woo thing of, like, "Ooh," like, "Are you creative or not?" And that's not the question. The question is, do you pay attention or not?
All of I am like a hippie about this stuff. I think all of us are creatives. I don't believe
Yep,
that there is a person alive that's not creative, because
100%.
even if you're working for an insurance adjustment agency on a phone all day, you are having to be creative with how you deal with your person on the phone, your coworkers. You're having to come up with ideas. What are you like? What do you want this to be like? And making it. Every
Mhm,
job, every mom, like, we're all creative. And so all of us need to be pulling things in and going, can I notice this? Can I pay attention to
mhm.
this? Could I reframe this so that I can be gentle with myself and be friends with the fear, I guess,
Absolutely,
and then do it anyway?
absolutely.
Well, that was rad.
Yeah, I would love to know all of y'all's thoughts out there, dear listeners. I think that fear is such a huge conversation. I mean, we're just scratching the surface, truly. I mean, of things that can be said about this topic. So, what are your thoughts? How has fear impacted your lives? What have you done about it?
Let us know.
Yeah.
If you're watching us right now on YouTube, which you can do, you can leave a comment. Tell
Oh,
us
yeah.
about it, okay? And if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can comment on our Instagram videos that we have. We do post a few throughout the week on these topics, and that's honestly, dear listener, is the handle there. And we want to hear from you. You can also email us, honestlydearlistener@gmail.com. Really, like, we're social babes. So a lot of why we do this is because we want to have a conversation with other people that are thinking about this stuff too. So let us
Absolutely.
know about it.
We love it. All
Yeah.
right, dear listener, until next week, thank you so much for listening.
Honestly, dear listener.
Woo!